All right, here we go. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to deal with the easier question first, which is to say, question number 1. What do we learn about the purposes and composition of the Klan during this period? The purposes would be, you know, what they were about, what they were trying to do, what they stood for, what they stood against, right? Composition has to do with who they were, all right? Who they were. So I'm going to start back here with Stacy and Andrea. Andrea, go ahead and get us started. Just go in wherever you want. Purposes and composition.
Well, there was 2 purposes. There were 2 purposes. One of them has to do with the incident between the film called The Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation, sure.
Yeah. And then also the murder of the 14-year-old.
Okay, so we have a film, The Birth of a Nation, and we have a rape and murder that are given as kind of the reason why the Klan was rebirthed, as it were, right? Okay. So with reference to those 2 things, though, what do we see in those 2 things that help us understand the purposes? Those are events that kind of, you might say, precipitated the rebirth, but what do these 2 events represent in terms of the purpose of the Klan? Stacey, what do you think?
More as like a law enforcement, sort of like they have to like protect their people.
Okay, all right, and that's good. And precisely, let's just focus in on the rape and murder of the 14-year-old girl. They have to protect whom precisely? I don't think so. Was he white? The victim was white, right? The girl was white.
He was white too, but he was Jewish.
Ah, he was Jewish. Okay, so he was Jewish, and he was hanged he was lynched, probably because he was Jewish and because he, you know, was thought to be guilty of the crime. Okay, so that's good. So, August, you're saying there's a kind of theme here about anti-Jewishness, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very much. All right, but also, what about the fact that it was a 14-year-old girl? This signified what? That these Klan people needed to protect what?
Protect women.
That's right. Protect womanhood, right? The purity of womanhood, right? Okay. Now, be careful about this. You might interpret that as honorable, right? But we might actually find out as we go deeper into this that this wasn't necessarily a movement about exalting the status of women. It may be a movement that uses that rhetorically, but in fact seeks to empower white males over white women. So let's think about that. And then back to the other thing. What about the movie Birth of a Nation? What's similar about that to this rape of the 14-year-old girl? Andrea?
It says one of Laura's character was fairly intended to symbolize innocent and purity, a white settler, and entrenched fears and stereotypes regarding black men, unholistic cravings for white women.
Right, notice that. The images are that black men are animalistic and that they crave white women and they're going to be rapacious, right? Think of how consistent that is with the other readings that we've been engaging in. It's completely consistent with, other sources that we've been looking at, right? So we have these 2 events, very good. We have these 2 events, as it were, that kind of mark the kickoff. And in doing so, we've already fleshed out the kind of anti-Jewish character of the movement, as well as the desire to preserve, in particular, white womanhood and the purity of white womanhood. And in protecting, by the way, white womanhood, we're protecting the white race. Okay? And then the other component is this deeply disturbing Not any more disturbing, by the way, than lynching a Jewish guy, but this deeply disturbing image that black men are rapacious and animalistic, and they're going to ravish our women. Okay, so that's where the kind of racist, anti-African American sentiment comes in. All right, Angela, what else do we see at work in this movement in terms of its purposes or the components of the movement?
An example of their purpose was they presented themselves as a defender of prohibition and Christian morality, yet in their composition they were caught drinking and being violent.
Okay, all right, very good. Let me see, Josh, is it? Is it Josh? Yes. Go ahead, Josh, what else? In addition to what Angela and the others have said. Nothing else to say. Okay, all right. Daphne? Okay, Money?
So what you mentioned that you asked for the purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of them, and we've certainly fleshed some out, but there's still some more to go.
Well, I think their purpose was to not just protect, but to hire themselves and kind of maybe create a monarchy, maybe. They wanted to be
So, in other words, you're saying they want political power.
Yeah, they want political power and
Did they gain political power?
Yes, they did.
They did in many states throughout the country, right? Right. This is no fringe movement, right? These people make political inroads. They actually have power in the national and state legislatures and in local governments, right? Okay, very good. Isaiah, you want to add anything? Still some other kind of components and purposes to flesh out here. What about the Christian, the so-called Christian appeal of this movement? Is that a precise characterization? It's okay.
That's not necessarily.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I have a note on that.
Go ahead.
The Clark and Tyler's propaganda focused on Protestant ministers, and they promised them to promote Protestant Christianity, and that's what really got started, making them popular.
Okay, so Protestant Christianity. Not what kind of Christianity?
Catholic.
Catholic Christianity, or Judaism, which of course is Judaism, right? But definitely not Catholic, so it's anti-Catholic, it's pro-Protestant, and of course they consciously made an appeal to the churches to recruit, right?
Yeah, I think they offered a free membership and deals on subscriptions and stuff like that.
Oh, sure, because, let's face it. If you're a preacher, you've got a pulpit, right? And, now we actually have a law in this country, which, by the way, the Republican president is thinking about putting out an executive order or encouraging legislation that would change this law. But basically that ministers, if the church for which they minister, ministers cannot get up in their pulpits and engage in political propaganda, right? If they do, then the church runs the thread, or it might lose its tax-exempt status, right? Okay. So now we have laws, or a law, which seeks to minimize that kind of activity, but back in the 20s, that was just not the case, all right? There's still more here, all right? What else, Bryce? What else do we need to mention about the purpose and composition of the Klan? What have we missed?
Well, what I got is that they were kind of informed by someone who was already part of the party. The Klan, Thomas E. Watson, they were kind of, after the rape, they were told that they need to revive the Klan and bring up their own view of home rule. And then
Home rule being what, Bryce? It's actually a buzz term that we didn't really go over when we were in Reconstruction, but when Reconstruction comes to an end, one of the reasons it comes to an end is why? Home rule. What do we mean by that? Do you know what I mean, Bryce? Okay. Mr. Huckett, do you know what I'm referring to here? What would home rule be in the South? Electing 100% Americans, which would be 100% white. That's right. Home rule, notice this, home rule is a buzz term for putting white folks back in power and getting rid of black folks in power. So in 1877, when Reconstruction is overturned, what happens is that home rule is reestablished, right? Okay, what else were you going to say, Brett?
Back to the Birth of Nations thing, they also, when they depicted the Klan in there, they said that they were like the defenders of the Southern culture and political institution, and were also guardians of pure whites and women, like we said before. So they basically depicted the Klan in an extremely explicit way.
Okay, and so everything we've said so far, with the exception of your statement, Money, about politics, for the most part has been about, well, culture. Things cultural. And home rule is political, I get it. But it's about protecting a so-called culture, right? A white culture, a southern culture. It's about culture, right? So far, right? Okay, so we've said nothing about socioeconomics here. What about the composition of the Klan Alexandria in terms of socioeconomics? In other words, what these people did for a living?
Well, something that I got, like another something that can contribute to like their founding is how they started the women's Ku Klux Klan. So they kind of like they wanted also like political and more political power since the women's vote.
Okay, so after 1920, when women got the right to vote, then they start appealing to women. That's certainly social in nature, which is to say, women are a social group, men are a social group, I get it. But that's not so much socioeconomics. So Ricardo, help us out with the socioeconomics here. Who were these people? Not just white folks.
They would be on the middle class to upper class. They wouldn't be lower class.
That's right. And did this surprise you by any chance?
Not really.
Uh-huh.
Thinking about their methods of things, so no, not really.
Okay. I think there's a stereotype out there that Klan members are poor and uneducated and unsophisticated, right? But that's not the picture that we get of the Klan in the 1920s. In fact, these people were middle class, and flesh that out a little bit more. What do you mean? Give some more precise definitions of what middle class means here. Who were these people?
They were mostly educated, and they mostly had businesses and past wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So these people were not like dumb and like thought of as in like demeaning way. They were like the upper society. So their whole movement was like trying to show that they were like the good thing, supposedly. You know, it's not really, you know.
Okay.
And they tried to make it look like their idea was the right idea because they were so wealthy and because they were so smart. Just follow.
Okay, and in their locales, that is to say, whether we're talking about in the Deep South or even out in places like Oklahoma or Oregon or Indiana, in their localities, these were professional people. These were successful people, right? They weren't wildly rich. And they weren't wildly rich, by the way, because the Klan tended to be what? With reference to bigness, I just blew it. With reference to business, what? Anti-big business. That's right, okay? They're not anti-business, they're anti-bigness, all right? So that's their business, right? All right, just playing. This is when the old white guy, tries to look hip. He says something that sounds hip to him, but all the young people look at him and go, "Oh my God, you didn't just say that, right?" All right. So socioeconomics. We're talking about professional people. Were there some people from the shall we say, the lower poorer classes? Gilbert, might you find some industrial workers in the Klan? Might you find some industrial workers in the Klan, Ricardo?
I believe so.
You think so?
One or two.
One or two, right? Because you got to have your token industrial workers in the Klan, right? No token black guys in the Klan, but token industrial workers, yes. That's another attempt at humor. Sorry about that. Okay, so but there's a kind of a characteristic here. I'm going to move over to this group. There's kind of a characteristic here of look at my names. There's kind of a characteristic here, Lynette, of industrial workers, but a certain kind of industrial worker. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Well, in our notes we put they aided women making women chapters. They pursued political positions. They also fought with union organizers and members of industrial workers of the world.
Okay, stop and explain that. That tells us what kind of industrial workers these would not have been. Be more explicit. They would not have been what kind of workers? Union members, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and what else?
Um,
What about the IWW? What's so important about the IWW? You mentioned the IWW, but it's not just a union, although it's a union. What's important about the IWW? Mr. Dunkirk? Okay, all right. What's that? What's your name? Yolanda.
Yeah.
I'm still not clear on this group completely, but anyway.
Most of the workers were either middle class, and some of the like lower class, but the lower middle class were plumbers,
But non-union.
non-union.
Okay, well, what's the point, though? I'm trying to get at the IWW. Why did the Klan hate, for instance, the IWW so much?
I'm trying to remember. Wasn't it like they were fighting for like equal pay?
Well, they were, but they were even more radical than that.
Oh, because they were more violent?
Yeah, they were violent, and in fact, if you look at the IWW and you study their ideology, they're practically anarchist, which is to say they don't want they don't like the government, and also they would prefer to overthrow capitalism and get rid of private property. So the IWW, these were the radical socialists, right? Notice then that the Klan is anti-socialist. It's anti-communist, right? It's not that they don't want to help poor people. It's that unions, and in particular radical ideologies like communism and socialism, are simply verboten, simply forbidden, right? So that's another kind of, how shall I say this, August? This is another way that anti-Jewishness seeps into the Klan because of the stereotype that the Jews were behind the development of capitalism, right? So they hate big business, they hate unions, because unions are dangerous, right? Okay? All right, that's a pretty good fleshing out there. Have we missed something? That's pretty good. You guys did a great job. Have we missed anything that's important about the composition and the purposes of the Klan? Okay, let me ask you this then. I think we did miss something. So here's the question. Is it Jackie? Noyola, right? Okay, Jackie? So, now I forgot what I was going to ask because I was thinking about Jackie's name. All right, here it is. Were these people marginalized? Were these Klan members marginalized? Were they outsiders? Were they outsiders, or did they actually have a firm kind of place in their local societies?
I feel like they had a firm place in their local societies, and I feel like they wanted to have a lot of people from each workforce and its membership to stay in power and to basically to restore white supremacy in the South and North.
Okay, all right. So the point I'm trying to get at here is kind of theoretical in nature. But sometimes social theorists have tried to explain, for instance, the Klan and right-wing movements as people who feel marginalized. People who feel like they're not being represented. People who don't fit in society. So again, when we think of the Klan now, we might think of, Viceland and, these documentaries you see about, hillbillies in North Carolina, carving wood for a living and completely kind of disengaged, as it were, apparently from, their local society. But that's a stereotype. And the important point here is that that these people are actually socially connected. Right? That's what makes their organization so effective, because in fact they're not just Klan members, but they're members of local Protestant churches, they're members of fraternal organizations, which we haven't mentioned here, but things like the Odd Fellows and the Masons. They're members of fraternal organizations. They are, as Ricardo said, very well connected in the local business community. They're fine, upstanding citizens. They serve on city councils, right? This is the point here that, I think that Mr. McVeigh is telling us that we make a huge mistake if we think of people in the Klan, at least in the 1920s, if we think of people in the Klan as somehow marginalized and so angry about being marginalized that they react to their marginalization. That is not what McVeigh is saying here. He is saying, surprisingly, that the Klan is respectable. Now, one other thing we haven't mentioned, and that is, okay, assuming they were racist, in what way does their racism not marginalize them? August?
Well, I guess it's because there are so many of them.
Well, there were so many of them, but even, what about people who didn't join?
Well, I feel like the white man kind of lost his privilege during this time because the government was socialistic and they tried to include as many as possible.
Okay. So here you're talking about threats that they felt, that they experienced. But that's not the question I'm asking. I'm saying in terms of their racism, let's assume they're racist, and they have racist attitudes, and the chapters certainly argue that. What I'm asking is, what does the author say about how that fact doesn't really make them marginal, but makes them mainstream?
Doesn't he actually say that, like a straight statement that, contrary to belief, that they were like these races that everybody looked at with disdain, that their views were very consistent with the entire nation at that time?
That's exactly right. And listen, you may never have been exposed to this, and you, how shall I say this? It may actually go against the grain of your own personal understanding. But, one of the things we've been doing for the last 4 weeks is building a case about the racial attitudes of this country. And, I hope it's pretty clear at this point that at least as late as the 1920s, this country, north and south, east and west, was filled with racial thinking. Eugenics, racial Darwinism, we've talked about it with reference to the condemnation of blackness and policing racism. I mean, one of the things that we've seen in this class is that in fact, not opinion, but in fact, there are measurable levels of racism in this country, at least as late as the 1920s and 1930s. So in that sense, this is the point, the Klan wasn't actually outside the mainstream with reference to their own racism. See? Okay. Now, I suppose, I don't know, maybe you guys don't, a lot of this stuff, really wouldn't have surprised me before I started getting an education because of the stereotypes that are out there about the Klan. Okay? Now, let me just say before we get into the next question, because I haven't said it yet, and that is, I never have taught the Klan before in my classes. I mean, we mention it. I've never gone into it. This is a brand new reading. I told you guys I hadn't even read it before I assigned it to you. I decided we have to talk about the Klan in this class, right? And the reason we have to talk about the Klan in this class, frankly, is because of the last 10 years in this country's history, the last 8 years in this country's history. Because it's about the Obama presidency and reactions to it, and of course, the reaction that is the Republican president's agenda, which is to make America great again. Now, let me be careful here. I'm not saying that all Trump supporters are racist. That's not what I'm saying. So don't misquote me. But I'm saying that the whole notion of making America great again is not necessarily misinterpreted when foes of this idea say what that really means is make America white again. Right? Make America great again by making America white again. Okay? Now, that's a critical edge. I get it. You might think that's biased. I understand. I don't think it necessarily is. I think it's reasonable. If it's not absolutely the truth, it can be argued And we will talk about that. Okay? So again, we're talking here about the 1920s and the Klan in the 1920s, but if in your reading you were thinking about contemporary developments, well, that's what history's for, right? Okay. Furthermore, it's important for me to note that history is also about explaining why things happen, not just what things happen, or what happens, but why they happen. You may have thought when you came into this class, this was going to be a class about what happened, about facts and dates and names and places. It's not. I don't think that's what this class should be about. This class should be about being able to give some explanations for how this country has changed or how it hasn't changed. But the study of history is about change. The only thing constant about history is change. History doesn't repeat itself. History doesn't stay the same. It changes. Now, that's not to say that things like racial hatred don't continue to exist in history. That's not what I'm saying either. What I'm saying is that in fact, if you study racist politics today, what you'll find is that it's not the same as it was in the 1920s. It can't be the same as it was in the 1920s. For instance, because of the Civil Rights Movement. It can't be. It has to change its form. So let me just throw one more thing out before we actually get to number 3, because we'll be talking about this in the rest of the semester. And that is, we've actually developed a rhetorical strategy in this country to talk about race without talking about race. It's called race-neutral language. So, for instance, you could talk about school desegregation and really be talking about race. You could talk about voter restrictions or voter registration laws. You could be arguing for voter registration laws, and you could actually be talking about race. But what we're very good at is we're talking about race. We're very good at talking about race in what appears to be a race-neutral language. This is why it's so hard to get to the bottom of racial politics in this country. Because people who are defensive about being racist, possibly, understand that they're actually not necessarily talking about race all the time when they're talking about race. See? So, it might be you don't want your kids to go to a school with black kids. But what you could do is you could say, well, I'm in favor of local schools. Local neighborhood schools. Now, I'm not saying that if you're in favor of local neighborhood schools that you're a racist. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's possible to hide behind that rhetoric when really you just don't want your white kids going to school with people of color, and you don't want your kids going to school with kids who are behind academically because they are from underprivileged neighborhoods with bad schools, right? You could be concerned about that, and you'd have to be very careful to not say it in a certain way, right? Okay. So I'm kind of trying to open your mind here to possibilities of explaining the present, although today we're talking really specifically about the Klan in the 1920s. All right? Okay. Now, question number 3 or 2 then. Explain as best you can the power devaluation model and how it might explain the rise of the Klan during this period. Who really bit into this one? Who really took it out for a spin and wants to just play? You can mess it up completely. Come on, let's have a volunteer here. What does power devaluation theory mean? How might it work? Okay, Angela? No, you can start. We got time.
I think the power devaluation model explains why it got so popular in KKK. It started out with rapid social change and fear. They were scared, disrupted how they think society should function. So they did collective grievances and organized to get political power to defend their sense of social order.
Okay, so you're saying that the Klan is a manifestation of fear and the devaluation of white power. Is that what you're saying?
I was just thinking society society in general.
Okay.
Or America.
Okay, all right. Jason, did you have something you wanted to say here? I noticed the group kind of turned to you.
I mean, I will.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, for the power de-evaluation model, it was pretty simple. It's kind of what we're seeing today, in which they kind of gathered together the people who felt like they were getting wrong, and back then it was mostly like, white Protestant kind of people.
So let me stop you for a minute, though. This is not a progressive movement that we're talking about, is it? It's a right-wing movement. So distinguish between a progressive movement and a right-wing movement.
So it was definitely a little bit more extreme than what we're seeing today. I mean, they're not out there today like lynching or killing anybody, or even trying to say that we should. Whereas back then that was a little bit more of a standard. So basically they were just trying to say, look at all these people around us, the women, the Asians, all these immigrants that are coming over. We're giving them rights. They're starting to get these, new things to them, but we're not getting any of these new things. We're just getting, killed. We're getting wages lowered. We're not really getting any benefits. So we should unify together so that way we can become the superior power all together instead of all these other people that are just coming over from who knows where.
Okay, I'm going to be picky, Jason, but you said so we can become. Is that really what they were after, becoming, or were they interested? Would you use a different word than becoming?
Well, I mean, I guess not becoming, but more like being the only.
Well, I think listen, you're doing great. Don't get me wrong here. You're doing great. But you're not coming up with the words I'm looking for, if you know what I mean. So you're talking about becoming or being. But what if I said, no, that's not what they're about? What's that? That's right. Retaining, restoring, retaining, and protecting, right? That's the difference. I'm sure you understand this. So between a right-wing movement and a progressive movement. Progressive movements are movements that are about people gaining access to privileges that they haven't had yet. But this is a restorative movement. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So you're basically saying that in comparison to like today, like a Bernie Sanders type of person who's going for a progressive movement, they were going for that. They were just trying to get back the power that they already used to have.
Well, now you've asked me to think about something I haven't thought about, and that is Bernie in the schema of devaluation. But yeah, you're right, that he is probably talking in economic terms about that very thing. That's right. But also, I mean, you can think about some of the complaints of the alt-right here, and you can see some of that going on, right? Okay. August?
I just think the demand of like such a group was so high, so it could have been any group at that time. And then just to explain it, kind of started before the demand was so high, so it kind of had its second rebirth, like so people just started joining it because they really wanted it, and they were like the only big group at the time.
Yeah, and surprisingly, maybe this is not the stereotypical view of the Klan either, but it's almost like the Klan was pretty inclusive, in the sense that it was quite diverse, although racially it wasn't diverse, right? It took in a lot of people. It basically said, I'm your voice, right? It kind of said, listen, if you've got a problem here in the South, we the Klan, we're going to fix it. All right? All right, good job, you guys. You did a great job. Thank you very much.